Good evening, Summa scholars. Again, I have quiet, need for quiet because they have a next door neighbor here. So I'll try to speak as quietly as I can and do Article 2 of Question 25, The Power of God, Part 1 of the Summa. Guys, it's Sunday evening one. I've been out and about doing things, taking care of business, hanging out with friends, and I'm going to have to do this real quick so I can get into my Sunday evening one festivities. I have not cut my hair. I have it pulled back away from my face, so don't be afraid. And we'll see if we can get this out in a quiet tone of voice, see how it comes out on the other end, and get into some daily Summa up on this beaver galleon, guys. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But let's see if we know what we're talking about here. Starting with Article 2, Question 25, Summa Theologica, Part 1, whether the power of God is infinite. What do you think Thomas is going to say? Again, of course we know the power of God is infinite. You're saying to me, Craig Kinsey, why are we studying this when we know the power of God is infinite? Well, let me ask you this. Do you really know? Do you really know? Or have you just heard words, infinite? What does that mean? You don't know what that means. God, God. What does that mean? You don't know what that means. So, do you really know? So let's see what Thomas has to say. Let's scoop through this and see if we can pick up any insights that maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, maybe 50 years from now will click in our minds and bring us to an experience like Thomas had. Whoops, I should probably go by the candle that Thomas had when he said, "This is all straw." And he turned away from writing and went into deeper prayer and then soon died thereafter. Guys, I hope you're having a wonderful, from what they tell me, it's Valentine's Day. I haven't really paid attention to that for about 10 years, but I understand that that's what it is. There are people having wonderful love relationships right now, which are an intimation of the future and things to come. But let's see if we can dig a little deeper into that actual deep root of Valentine's Day, talking about the infinite power of that which is commonly referred to as God. Here we go. Objection 1 from Larry. Larry steps up to the plate and says, "It seems that the power of God is not infinite." Okay. For everything that is infinite is imperfect, according to the philosopher. But the power of God is far from imperfect, therefore it is not infinite. Everything that is infinite is imperfect. Why would the philosopher have said that? Because perfect means, okay, so remember we always toggle back and forth between human and divine perspective. Perfect in the philosophical sense from Aristotle means a form has come to its completion. So once a little puppy becomes a full dog, once a little baby becomes a full human, once a little sapling becomes a full tree, it is called perfect. That is how the philosopher means the term perfect. But that, of course, is regarding space time, form, change, movement into its fullness, into its full nature from its quiddity, its full nature from its essence. But in God, such is not the case, because his essence is existence. But Thomas will probably explain that later on. Okay, objection 2. Ralph walks up and says, "Further, every power is made known by its effect." Okay. Otherwise, if you see a guy sitting in a okay, let's do this. You see Ralph Macchio sitting there, and he's at the karate exhibit, and he you don't know anything about him. You're like, what power does he have? And then he steps up and he does the crane, and he's karate master. Then you see his power exhibited, and you realize what was within him the whole time, and it's manifest. Further, every power is made known by its effect. Once you see the effect of Machio going up and being the Karate Kid, then you see that he has that power. But you only realize it once it's manifest. Otherwise, it would be ineffectual. if he never showed it, if he never fought, it would never be anything. It would be in him, latent, but it would never be manifest. It would be imperfect, ineffectual. But if then the power of God were infinite, it could produce an infinite effect, but this is impossible. We'll see what Thomas has to say to that at the end. Objection 3. Further, the philosopher proves that if the power of any corporeal thing were infinite, it would cause instantaneous movement. God, however, does not cause instantaneous movement, but moves the spiritual creature in time, and the corporeal creature in place and time, as Augustine says. Therefore, his power is not infinite. Again, we're going to toggle it back and forth between human and divine perspective, and so Thomas will probably address that when he does his reply to objection 3. Let's see how we're doing on this other page. We're going to go into Article 3 at the end of this. All right, so let's hear what Thomas says from his argument from authority. On the contrary, Hilary says that God's power is immeasurable. He is the living mighty one. Now, everything that is immeasurable is infinite. Therefore, the power of God is infinite. Now, that's an argument from authority. Let's go into his respondio, which is the more logical argument. As stated above in Article 1, active power exists in God according to the measure in which he is actual. Active power exists in God according to the measure in which he is actual. Now, his existence is infinite inasmuch as it is not limited by anything that receives it. As is clear from what has been said, when we discuss the infinity of the divine essence in question 7, Article 1. Remember that? Of course you remember. We all remember that. Question 7, are you kidding me? Probably not. Wherefore, it is necessary that the active power in God should be infinite, for in every agent is it found that the more perfectly an agent has the form by which it acts, the greater its power to act. For instance, the hotter a thing is, the greater the power it has to give heat. And it would have infinite power to give heat were its own heat infinite. Whence, since the divine essence through which God acts is infinite, as was shown above in question 7, Article 1, it follows that his power likewise is infinite. His power likewise is infinite. Basically, it's just saying that God is infinite, so of course his power is infinite. Why are we going through this when we've already discussed it, and the answer follows from what we've already discussed? Because, as I've said, what the Daily Summa is to review these things over and over until they start to catch, and also, more importantly, it seems to me, not to gain more and more intellectual insight. It's like the guys and the gals who are out tonight doing their Valentine's Day hang with their beloved. Why are they going out to see him again? They've already seen them. Why are they going out to talk to them again? They've already talked to them. Why are they going out to have coffee with them again? They've already had coffee with them. Why are they going to eat again? Because it's not an intellectual process. We're sitting here hearing the things of God over and over because this is our beloved. And the more we hear it, the more we grow in intimacy, the more the knowledge we have of God sinks in deeper to a heart level. And then we can finally have an experience like Thomas says, in which we no longer need this because it's straw. And the straw is burned, and our little souls float up on the heat of that burning straw into the stratosphere. That's what we're looking for. We hear it over and over again because we're staring upon the face of our beloved. Okay, reply to objection 1. The philosopher is here speaking of an infinity in regard to matter, not limited by any form. That's what I said, the form. The doggy turns into a big doggy. It's talking about forms changing into their perfection. But this is not limited to any form. And such infinity belongs to quantity. But the divine essence is otherwise, as was shown above in question 7, Article 1. And consequently, so also his power. It does not follow, therefore, that it is imperfect. It's just saying we're not talking about the human movement of form into its full perfection, because God is already the infinite being that is holding up all form the divine logos holds all things together in its being, in his being. Reply to objection 2. The power of a universal agent is wholly manifested in its effect. The generative power of man, for example, is not able to do more than beget man. That's talking about sex, y'all. That's talking about man begetting man. But the power of a non-univocal agent does not wholly manifest itself in the production of its effect, as, for example, the power of the sun does not wholly manifest itself in the production of an animal generated from putrefaction. Wow, come on, Thomas. The sun's not making another sun. The sun's power is such that something putrefies and it turns into soil, but then it creates something other than itself, like a plant or grass or whatever. Now, it's clear that God is not a univocal agent, for nothing agrees with him either in species or in genus, as was shown above. Question 3, Article 1, 5. Question 4, Article 3. Whence it follows that his effect is always less than his power. It is not necessary, therefore, that the infinite power of God should be manifested so as to produce an infinite effect. Yet, even if it were to produce no effect, the power of God would not be ineffectual, because a thing is ineffectual which is ordained towards an end to which it does not attain. But the power of God is not ordained towards its effect as towards an end. Rather, it is the end of the effect produced by it. God's power is the end. God is the efficient cause, formal cause, and final cause of all things. He is being itself. A reply to objection 3. The philosopher proves that if a body had infinite power, it would cause a non-temporal movement. And he shows that the power of the movement of heaven is infinite, because it can move in an infinite time. It remains, therefore, according to his reckoning, that the infinite power of a body is such, if such existed, would move without time, not, however, the power of an incorporeal mover. The reason of this is that one body moving another is an univocal agent. Wherefore it follows that the whole power of the agent is made known in its motion. I'm picturing you guys all just sitting out there going, wait, what? Motion. Since then, the greater the power of a moving body, the more quickly does it move. The necessary conclusion is that its power if its power were infinite, it would move beyond comparison faster, and this is to move without time. An incorporeal mover, however, is not a univocal agent. Whence it is not necessary that the whole of its power should be manifested in motion so as to move without time, and especially since it moves in accordance with its disposition, the disposition of its will. There could probably be a lot of interesting things to go in here with what we now know of, oops, I'm probably blocking my little microphone here, of what we now know of quantum physics and the perplexing realities of the spinning oh gosh, I'm too far. What are the spinning electrons? The spinning electrons that are oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Sorry guys, I'm blanking. But they are linked. Man, this is so sad. They're linked. We all know what I'm talking about. I'll think of it as I watch this back. I'll know exactly the terms, but they are linked no matter how far apart they are. There could probably be a lot to go in and to say about that. And remember what I said about how in creation there are links that go from different levels. Oh, did you put it up? Did I just see the chat go up, but I missed it? Why does it make it fade away? You probably just put it up there and I should have seen it, and I'm so sorry. But as I said before, in creation, you have links that go from one level to the other. Like, for instance, you have herbs, plants, and they don't have motion, But then you have the Venus flytrap or the heliotropic sunflower that has sort of motion. It's sort of animal-like. It's like a link between the plant and the animal. And then you have primates that in some sense have a sort of link. They use tools and things. They have a link between animal and human animal. And then there's a link between the human and the divine, which Christ produces that link and then does it within the saints if they so desire. It's a free choice link. So also seems to me anyway, that you have links in the spiritual realm, and these connections in quantum physics behave somewhat materially and somewhat spiritually, so that you have material elements through vast links of space acting together as two gosh, why can't I think of the term of two electrons that are, I wish I could pull the chat up because I saw that it came up and you guys told me what it was. And entangled. There it is. Man. Wow. That was a hard birth process, guys. Entangled. What is it? Entangled. Exactly. Two entangled. So Thomas is talking here about you have matter that moves across distances. But in the spiritual realm, what was the original question that was asked in objection 3? Further, the philosophy proves that if that power of a corporeal thing were infinite, it would. Okay, so it's the kind of the middle ground. It seems to me. I've never heard anyone say this before, by the way, guys. So grain of salt. But it seems to me, quantum entanglement is like that middle ground going deeper into the spiritual realm, just like a Venus flytrap is the middle ground between plant and animal. It seems like the quantum entanglement is a middle ground between the eternal reality, which is all things at once in the mind of God, and space-time. Take that as you wish, but how can it not be true? I mean, doesn't that just make sense? So what Thomas is showing here is that God, again, we toggle back and forth between the human and the divine perspective. From the human perspective, we have space-time movement, but in the divine perspective, his power is perjuring. His power is constantly holding everything up in being. He is the formal cause. He is being itself. So all these things are happening at once within him. I've probably already taken too much time. Article 3. Let's go into the next question. Again, guys, like I said, I could talk about all these things. We could go into one of these objections for an hour, but this is the daily Summa. We're doing it daily, and we're just skimming through, seeing the face of our beloved. Just like when you take your little lady or you take your little man out to dinner, you can't go into the full depth of him on your 3rd date, on your 8th date, on your 10th date, on your 8th child. You'll never get there. We're just observing our beloved, falling deeper in love. Article 3, whether God is omnipotent. Whether God is omnipotent. I think we can guess what Thomas is going to say. Objection 1. It seems that God is not omnipotent, says Larry. For movement and passiveness belong to everything. But this is impossible with God, for he is immovable. And as is said above, question 2, article 3, therefore he is not omnipotent. Of course, we're toggling both between human and divine nature, and Larry is thinking about human nature. Objection 2. Further, sin is an act of some kind. But God cannot sin, for nor deny himself, as is said in 2 Timothy 2:3. Therefore, he is not omnipotent. Wow. Objection 3. Further, it is said of God that he manifests his omnipotence especially by sparing and having mercy. Therefore, the greatest act possible to the divine power is to spare and have mercy. There are things much greater, however, than sparing and having mercy. For example, to create another world and the like. Therefore, God is not omnipotent. Wow. These dudes been smoking that reefer on the back of the galleon, guys. Come on. We're not talking about power like Nietzsche. We're talking about true power, which is divine power, which is kenosis, total self-giving love, as you would have here today on Valentine's Day. I hope you guys are all having that beautiful kenosis, self-giving love with your beloveds. Okay, objection 4. Further, upon the text, God hath made foolish the wisdom of the world, 1 Corinthians 1:20. A gloss says, God has made the wisdom of this world foolish by showing things to be possible, which, by the way, we're about done with this, guys. Hold tight. Foolish by showing those things to be possible, which it judges to be impossible. Whence it would seem that nothing is to be judged possible or impossible in reference to inferior causes, as the wisdom of this world judges them, but in reference to the divine power. If God, then, were omnipotent, all things would be possible. Nothing, therefore, impossible. Well, that's clever and abundantly wrong. We will get to the bottom of this question tomorrow. Guys, have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Remember, this is all straw. We're not here on this earth to have a bunch of intellectual, nerdy discussions. We're not here on this earth to figure out what gear to use in your show. We're here to put on a show. We're here to have an experience. We're here to interact interpersonally. And all that's going to lead you up the ladder to He who is personhood itself, and have a wonderful final experience with the divine, which we will enjoy for all eternity. Let's see what you have to say. Boom, mic drop. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And with the mic drop goes the light drop. Bye, guys. Love you. Have a good night. Happy Valentine's Day. Peace.